Okay, welcome everybody to the Wednesday, March 15th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Trainer, would you like to call roll?
Yeah. Ms. Friedlander.
Here.
Mr. Stevens.
Here.
Mr. Puentes.
Here.
Ms. Coma.
Here.
Mr. Hyra.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We've got two of our members are absent this evening, but we have five of us, so we're in good shape. Regarding the agenda, you'll see that we don't have the Pearson Square voluntary concession modification this evening. That will be on April 5th, I think, deferred to allow for appropriate advertisement and so forth. So a little bit less on the agenda this evening. Regarding receipt of petitions, Mr. Trainer, do we have anybody who wants to speak this evening?
No, we do not.
Do not. Okay, so we are ready to move right into our action items. And the first item we have is the outdoor dining ordinance. Mr. Stoddard, is there anything you'd like to say to introduce this?
Sure. I'm happy to provide a short introduction before turning it over to our case planner on this one. This item is before the Commission for a public hearing, as well as your formal recommendation back to Council, as it is a proposed amendment to the city zoning ordinance. The materials in terms of the proposed ordinance are the same as you saw at your work session. The updates to the staff report, which are responses to your questions and comments, are highlighted, but I'll leave the report out again to Ms. Laura Arsenault, our case planner on this. I do want to summarize that staff is recommending a positive motion from the Commission on this, guided by three principles there on line 14 of the staff report: the popularity of outdoor dining, the importance of providing certainty for business owners, as well as the desire to provide flexibility in required parking to accommodate that outdoor dining. But with that, I will turn it over to our case planner, Laura Arsenault.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Stoddard. Once again, I'm Laura Arsenault, and I'm a principal planner with Planning and Zoning. Planning Commission tonight is requested to hold a public hearing and make recommendations to City Council on the proposed zoning ordinance text amendments related to outdoor dining. Outdoor dining is currently operated under temporary zoning flexibility made available under the COVID emergency legislation, which is scheduled to expire on March 27th, 2023. City Council is scheduled to hold a public hearing at its next regular meeting on outdoor dining, March 27th, 2023, and to make a motion. As a reminder, the proposed code amendment includes only language for existing and future outdoor dining applications on private property, and staff will develop a process for outdoor dining on public right-of-way and another process. Staff has responded to comments from the Planning Commission work session held on March 1st, 2023, including questions related to T-zones, zoning administrator parking reduction criteria, examples of the zoning administrator authority in the current zoning ordinance, as well as updates on meals tax revenue and a request for follow-up report to the Planning Commission in 6 months. These are discussed in detail in the staff report. Staff will respond verbally to the zoning administrator parking and authority questions during the presentation. On February 13th, 2023, Council referred Ordinance TO 23-01 to amend the zoning ordinance text to clarify and to make permanent provisions for outdoor dining to the Planning Commission and Economic Development Authority. Staff presented to the Economic Development Authority on March 7th, 2023, and received a positive recommendation. Overall, there has been positive community and business support for the changes to outdoor dining text and the new process. During staff analysis, staff reviewed federal, state, and local codes related to outdoor dining, as well as providing research on neighboring jurisdictions. As mentioned, staff is proposing zoning ordinance text updates, as well as updating the outdoor dining permit process to administer the proposed zoning ordinance text. Please note there are no modifications, as Mr. Stoddard said earlier, to the zoning ordinance language since the March 1st, 2023 Planning Commission work session. As a quick overview, staff is proposing the following changes to the zoning ordinance. We will be creating a definition for outdoor dining, updating references to the new outdoor dining use section throughout the zoning ordinance, and making new supplementary regulations for outdoor dining. This will include zoning administrator permit approval, and with this approval, the zoning administrator may request inspections, add conditions, and revoke the permit if standards are not met. Further, the zoning administrator may modify the required parking by reviewing expected parking demands both with or without the proposed outdoor dining use. the burden the proposed outdoor dining use on nearby public or shared parking, the record of parking complaints by adjacent businesses, and/or the burden on city parking enforcement. Additionally, the Planning Commission requested current examples in the zoning ordinance where the zoning administrator has discretion over decisions. Existing examples include temporary stands or sales facility uses, mobile food service, conversion of parking spaces, parking minimums for non-conforming uses, corner lots and minimum vision, and sign permits. I'll go through a quick overview as well as the new permit process for outdoor dining. The administrative permit approval by the zoning administrator will be a one-time application. There's no fee, but there will be a review by building safety, fire, and police. Staff will work with businesses that have existing approved outdoor dining uses to update their certificates of occupancy, as well as their outdoor dining layout. For new outdoor dining use permits, staff is proposing the completion of a form and submission materials, which includes a dining layout, a certificate of occupancy, and other materials as needed. These materials are similar to what businesses already provide to the city for other permits. Staff completing the following outreach to the community and businesses. We hosted a daytime meeting with the restaurants, created a city webpage to provide the public with information, and distributed a one-page flyer to all the restaurants. Staff also engaged with the Economic Development Authority and the Chamber of Commerce. Moving forward with timing, we're here tonight, March 15th, for the Planning Commission public hearing and recommendation. We're looking forward to going to council for the second reading on March 27th, 2023, which is also the same day the COVID provisions expire. We're working internally with staff in the discussion of T-zones and how outdoor dining could relate to that, as well as looking forward to September 2023 for the 6-month report out on the outdoor dining permit process. And once again, the outdoor dining public and the right-of-way analysis is to be determined. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the answers to all of our questions from the last meeting. Let me open it up to any of the commissioners if there are questions, comments, especially on the proposed motion.
I just want to say thank you for going back and pulling the data for the meals tax receipts for 2018 and 2019 before the pandemic. That was really helpful to see. So, we've gone from 3.3 million in 2018, 3.5 million in 2019, down to 3 million in 2020, which you would expect with the pandemic. 2021 was also pretty low, but then it just, grows massively in 2022 to 4 million, and it's projected to be 4.4 this year. So, hard to know exactly how much of that to attribute to outdoor dining, but I think it's a reasonable assumption that it's definitely made a pretty big contribution. I see the busy patios, and so I do think that this is a good thing, for the life of the city and for our bottom line. So thank you for going back and pulling that data and answering all the other questions. Can you talk a little bit about how you think you might proceed with the T-zone question? I know it's a little murky since that's also something that's in process right now, but if you have any other things to add on that, I'd be interested.
Not specifically. I've discussed with Mr. Trainer and shared with him my language that I've proposed in my districts and the business districts. And so we've talked about how we might weave that into the T-zone language. We haven't gotten into detail on that, but I'm happy to report back.
So that language would be included somehow in the T-zone updates?
Correct.
Should those pass and not in the outdoor dining ordinance?
I would wait until it goes in the T-zone since we're changing T-zone language specifically, and then we can add the outdoor dining provision in there. It's very similar to how the B1 district has outdoor dining and a B2 has outdoor dining, and then the T-zones would each have outdoor dining as well as an accessory use.
Okay, and it would just reference this ordinance?
Correct. It would reference the supplementary regulations for outdoor dining.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? I just had one question, and I think it's just a matter of you confirming my understanding that if the zoning administrator does make let's say a ruling, or I'm not even sure what the technical term is, on a change from our parking standards, which presumably would require less parking, which I think we're more or less comfortable here. If there is a concern about that or a complaint, there's the opportunity to appeal to the Board of Zoning appeals, is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, I've talked to the zoning administrator about that. Any appeal to a zoning ordinance determination would automatically be appealed to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and that would be the same with the outdoor dining determinations.
Right, okay, all right, I just wanted to confirm that that's the process. Okay, so unless there are any other questions or concerns, would someone like to make the proposed motion?
I can do it.
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay. Whereas on February 13th, 2023, the City Council referred ordinance TO 23-01, proposed zoning ordinance amendment text related to outdoor dining to the Planning Commission and the Economic Development Authority. And whereas the City Charter, Section 17.13 mandates that zoning text amendments be referred to the Planning Commission by the City Council for review and recommendation. And whereas the Planning Commission held a required meeting with proper noticing during its March 15th, 2023 meeting, now therefore I move the following. 1, that the Planning Commission recommends Council grant final approval to the proposed zoning ordinance text amendments to support outdoor dining.
And is there a second? Second. Mr. Puentes on the second. Mr. Trainer?
Yes. Ms. Friedlander,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes,
Yes.
Ms. Comont,
Yes.
Mr. Hyra,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you again, Ms. Arsenault.
Great, thank you very much.
All right, so now I think we turn to our review of the Board and Commission liaison. I think there's a list in our items here. There we go. So any preliminary comments? I know you've highlighted one kind of open item that we have there to fill. Is that-
Right. Typically, the commission reviews its liaison appointments as part of its organizational meeting. Of course, there was a turnover in commissioners subsequent to that, and so we're bringing this back for your attention. And of course, I would sort of encourage you all to think about the whole slate of appointments, not just sort of necessarily a one-for-one replacement, but think of this as an opportunity to think about other opportunities commissioners want to serve on.
Okay. We have an opening on the Recreation and Parks Advisory Board, so I guess the question there is, Commissioner Friedlander, would you like to be that individual?
I would be happy to be that individual. In looking at all of the other boards and commissions, I have conflicts on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Uh-huh.
So, and I can't make a morning meeting.
Yeah.
That one is actually, I'm kind of excited about that one. So, and I did come from the AAB, so I'm fine with not
doing
being
that.
on that one right
Yeah.
now, just to get a little bit more educated on some of the other things that are happening in the city.
And that's what I found, as being liaison to some other committees has really given me a chance to learn a lot more about them. And I think it also helps the Planning Commission too. We don't have to go to every meeting, but as many meetings as we can go to, I think it does help on the outreach from the Planning Commission as well. So thank you very much for undertaking that. Are there any other kind of adjustments or proposed changes that anybody would like to suggest?
I don't have any proposed changes, but maybe a correction for the EDC. I think Mr. Stevens is the main liaison there, and I'm the backup. Right?
I am totally indifferent. They're actually good meetings. It's not the greatest time, other than for me. It's not a
yeah.
problem. But they
Yeah.
do capture a lot of information as relates to development here in the city. So I've found it certainly a worthwhile committee to go to.
And I'm happy to continue to be the liaison to the CACT. I think that's my main commitment. I'm a backup to Mr. Hyra on the Housing Commission, and try to attend the EDA meetings with Mr. Stevens when I can, which seems to be another board that's helpful to, open to anybody and helpful to attend.
They are? Yeah. Very good. Okay. Any other changes or comments? Are we good to go with what we have here? We can obviously this is an ongoing issue that negotiations amongst commissioners is encouraged and allowed, so nothing chiseled in stone here. So otherwise, I think, Mr. Stoddard, you have, I think, what you need from us for this evening?
Yeah, that's perfect. We'll make those adjustments and go from there.
Terrific.
And we'll obviously let the liaisons for Rec and Parks know about the new assignment.
Sounds good.
Yep.
I think you have an actual vote on that commission, too, so.
That means there's a lot of homework.
A lot of pressure there, but,
It's all good.
okay. All right, so I guess we have our minutes from March 1st. Anybody have any suggested changes to those minutes? If not, would someone like to make a motion to adopt those minutes?
I'll move we adopt the minutes of March 1st, 2023.
Is there a second?
A second?
All those in favor, say yes.
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 Any noes? Any abstentions? All right, I think we have minutes for March 1st. I believe that moves us to item 7, which is our work session and the rules of procedure. Mr. Stoddard.
Sure. Let me briefly introduce it before turning it over to Mr. Jack Trainer, who was the author for the staff report as well as for the updates to the document. But as you know, going back several years now, at the end of each calendar year, we've issued a sort of a service survey to the planning commissioners to get a better sense of how staff can better support the planning commission, as well as to get any feedback you all have on how the meetings are conducted and what would make your meetings more efficient and more effective. I take it as a sense of pride, actually, that we only got one response back this year. So I take it to mean that we're actually doing a pretty good job, but that doesn't mean there isn't still room for improvement. So you can see we did recommend some changes, some spot fixes to the rules of procedure, which went through a major overhaul a few years back, and we've been making sort of improvements to that since then. So I'll turn it over at this point to Mr. Jack Trainer so he can walk you through the specific recommendations.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Stoddard. And so in the staff report, I've listed out the handful of suggested changes to the rules of procedure. The first one is on line 177, and we can walk through the actual draft document too, but just to go over what the proposed changes are briefly, there's proposed amendments to the annual program section, clarifying or modifying some of the components to be considered in the annual program. And on line 292 of the agenda is kind of a clerical modification from written notification to electronic. Line, should be 413, sorry about that, electronic participation. We'll go over this in a little more depth at the next item. Other city staff, the city clerk's office recommended that this policy be adopted as a separate policy so that's more easily updatable in the future as modifications are made at the state level instead of having to reapprove the planning commission rules of procedure time and again.
Okay.
On line 531, we've proposed modifications to the public hearing procedure. This involves just one line in making space for the commission to ask the applicant and staff questions in the public hearing process for due applications. In line 707, on summary of comprehensive plan updates, there's a table summarizing the adoption of each comprehensive plan chapter. The public art amendment has been included there in Chapter 3. And lastly, on line 824 in Appendix 3 is another matrix listing kind of guiding questions and documents for certain considerations in your capacity as planning commissioners. And some of this language has been simplified to clarify, hopefully, certain considerations when looking at special exceptions. So I can go through the draft itself, and I guess we, can take any questions that there might be for each edit. So the first one here is the annual program. Again, including, in addition to items assigned to the commission may also identify key policy issues to address, such as comprehensive plan updates, small area planning, special studies, and zoning ordinance text amendments.
Am I correct that if we had, let's say, interest in accessory dwelling units, that we want to perhaps take that on as an issue, that this language would allow for that?
Yeah, so this is sort of a response to, in the last iteration, or the last two iterations of the council work plan, the council has taken efforts to be more directive to the boards and commissions. I think previously the council work plan was more organic, with each of the component boards and commissions coming up with recommendations for what council should be pursuing. And I think council is trying to provide a little more guidance to make sure everyone's going in the same general direction. And so some of this is responsive to, sort of message received. Council's going to assign work items to the boards and commissions, but also understanding there is a need for that organic nature to the city's policy developments and programming. And so this is acknowledging, yes, the group is going to pursue the work of the council work plan, but also understanding that you all are an independent group, and you might have sort of suggestions for your own. And trying to sort of mark out a little bit of space for the Planning Commission as well, saying comprehensive plan, small area plan, some special studies, zoning ordinance amendments, those are really the things that are within the purview of the Planning Commission, and trying to stake a little bit of claim to those things.
Good. Okay.
In line 293 here's striking the former B item under agenda, being each member of the commission, applicants, their agents, and other affected or interested parties shall be notified by written agenda. Such notice shall act as official reminder to all parties of said meeting.
And here, it was just a little confusing. We didn't exactly know what it meant by other affected or interested parties. That's sort of a broad term, so maybe we could have just struck that item. But I think in general, we could certainly keep the line, but I think we were just worried about sort of the broad language of how do I know if someone's interested or not, and do I even have contact information for them if they are?
I
Plus
do.
it-
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I did have a question about this. I didn't know if, do you want to say we'll prepare and post the agenda on the city website?
Oh, sure.
And then, was there any sort of timeliness? I know you all try to post about a week in advance. I don't know if that is required currently by the rules of procedure, or if you want to, maybe there's reason not to specify a window like that here, but that was something that I wondered about when I read this.
We do try to post, I don't know that we wrote that down. It's probably worth writing down, that we do try to post the materials about a week in advance. That's one of the big lifts we made a couple years ago. It used to be meetings on a Monday and packet went out late Friday, and that wasn't great.
No.
It was stressful for staff. It didn't give a chance for the community to be sort of fully informed on issues, and obviously the commissioners themselves didn't have a chance to review the packet. So I think we might be able to sort of work that in, that the expectation is, a package distribution on, let's say by Thursday, close of business, the week
Sure.
before a meeting.
And then, I don't know if you also want to say, sometimes the packet is updated. If you have additional information, you might want to include that, just so people are aware that there may be updates to the package even after it's posted.
Yeah,
Does
so
that
I think
seem-
we can probably keep B in there, maybe strike the sort of the other affected or interested parties, and add the line that posting will be made through the city's online notification system, to which anyone interested in the Planning Commission can subscribe.
Right. And then you'll include something about the language
Yeah,
for the...
I'll figure out exactly where that goes. That might be, I don't know if that's in the agenda. We'll look for a right spot for that. I don't
have to
have it off the
decide
top
now
of
this
my
year.
head, but I think there's a sort of a scheduling piece, and we can look for a spot in there.
Okay.
That would be great. If I could, I'm sorry, Derek. did you-
No, good.
No, I appreciate that comment, that it's important to get that week in front because all of us have day jobs and it's important to be able to figure out when we're going to make time. But when we do get updates, it's important to still be notified that the planning commissioners get notified as well, right? Not just that it's posted on the website, because I don't look at the website all the time unless I'm prompted, like, hey.
I think Mr. Trainer's
Yeah,
been pretty
Mr.
good
Trainer.
about-
Yeah,
He-
I know, and I appreciate that. So I want to make sure that we don't let that go.
Right, right.
That's all.
Makes sense.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just had one comment that, this line of or language about other affected or interested parties, I mean, just have the public. I mean, that's the whole point, right? That we're notified as commissioners, obviously the applicants, but the general public. It just seems weird, like other interested parties. What does that mean? Like, it is pretty hard to define. But if you just say "and the public," then it's very easy to define. It's everyone else in our city besides us, which I think is important because I do recall that we had, language. I think it was around the T-zones that was updated and so quickly and close to our meeting that many of us didn't see the language before it went up during the meeting, and definitely the public didn't see the language, and that was a little bit jarring. So, but you guys do an amazing effort, I would say. I mean, you really get us the information in a timely manner. Sometimes it's so in advance, I don't even look at it because I'm like, oh, I got a week, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I got to look at it before the meeting, or sometimes even more than a week. So you do a great job with that. But then I guess the gray areas when there are updates to what you send out in a very timely manner. So just kind of making sure that there's some language about getting it out. I don't know. You usually get it out a week or even more. But then when that's where the problem comes in, with those updates. And usually, Jack, you do a good job of saying, yeah, there was an update, like here it goes. And it does get to us, but I think it only gets to us, right? Like the public doesn't get notified there are updates. And I don't know how you figure out how to work on that. But maybe there's just a blast that you can do out that, like, whatever you put online of the agenda or supplemental materials, somehow when it does get updated, there's something that goes to us. But then also, is there a way to ping the public just to let them know? I don't know what that communication would be or how you would do it, but it would be great if you could.
There is, so through the city's website, there is what's called a Notify Me feature for anyone watching and not signed up. Please sign up for Notify Me. I'd like to have the best numbers of any board and commission. But there is a Notify Me system, and the benefit of being on that is that when materials are posted for agendas, an e-blast does go out to anyone who's signed up for that. And what we can do is make it a regular practice, and happy to include it in the rules of procedure. We can make it a regular practice that not only do we send a push when the initial agenda goes out, but we can send a subsequent push when the materials are amended. And there's, it's most meetings don't have amended materials, but there certainly are some that do. And obviously, we're not going to, this isn't the kind of thing we're going to be doing it every day. But obviously, it makes sense to let people know materials have been amended, and we can work that in. I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
So yeah, going down a little further, this is the suggested language under the electronic participation section again, which we'll talk about a little further in depth in the next agenda item here. So yeah, this is going to replace the language that preceded it entirely as a separate policy. And on line 532, commission questions for staff or applicant has been added to the procedure for a public hearing.
That's just a clarification. It's a typical step we do where following the staff as well as the applicant presentation, there is typically a pause where commissioners can ask for clarifying comments or questions before opening the public hearing, and we just wanted to make clear that that is a typical step.
I think the last couple at the bottom, there's the public art amendment adopted in March 21 by this planning commission and then by city council in April 2021. Oops. And then the two major Cs at the end include references to the state code on considerations for rezoning applications and those kind of buckets of considerations, I guess you'd put it, for those, as well as the same for proffered conditions. Yeah, and so that's the summary of the changes to the rules of procedure. Are there any other questions unaddressed?
I did have one question. I noticed on, right at the beginning, on line 23, on the 7A, let's see, what is that? January 27th, 2021. That has an amendment, January 27th, 27 January 2021, but the next one, the draft PC Rules of Procedure, ends at 4 March 2019. Does that need one more amendment? Whatever the final version.
Oh, are we missing an amendment?
Well, that's assuming I'm interpreting this correctly. But one of them has 4 amendments, and the second one has 5. So I assume 5 is more accurate, but
I think this was last amended in 21, wasn't it?
Oh, so we missed that date. Okay.
so just add that.
Good. I
Don't think I had anything else. I guess you're going to get into the electronic participation. Yeah. Any other questions or comments before we get?
I just had one that, with these rules and procedures, Paul, you mentioned that, sort of city council sets the agenda. We have a first reading with city council, then they sort of farm out things. But we did have an instance where there was development that related to zoning, but also the zoning and the development had financing. And that's often the case, almost is always the case. Not always, but very often. And city council didn't farm that out to us. And I don't know if there's a way to put in something about the finance of development also comes directly to us. Because I think it's very odd that we do zoning changes, we look at development related to small area plans and the comprehensive plan, but then sometimes part of the execution of that doesn't come to us. And I mean, I think a clear example is going to be the T-zones. We're asked to rezone, but we have asked council to look at how the taxes related to that and putting an overlay of a maybe tax increment financing district. We had the same thing with the West End, with the schools. But city council sometimes farms out the finance part to us and sometimes doesn't. And it should always come to us. It's odd that the finance related to development is sometimes at the whim of whether council wants to put it to us or not. So I don't know if we I don't know exactly where it is, but you had sort of zoning and a bunch of things that do come to us, and I think the financing related to zoning should be in the procedures for us.
Yeah, I can take look at
I think it's like
that.
roles and responsibilities. I think
Yeah,
it's right
it's-
there. And financing is not mentioned. It's,
Yeah, so a lot of this is, I probably just need a little bit of time to sort of think it through in between meetings, but it's, right there on line sort of 89 is sort of the powers and the authorities of the Planning Commission. And a lot of those things have a sort of an explicit reference, whether it's out of state code or city code. And obviously there are things, like you're saying, that are related to that. So I'd have to maybe think about how to fit that in. So if it's not something sort of mandatory, it would really be, yeah, I just got to think it through about how that would fit within sort of it's sort of an expectation for what the council's going to do, but it's sort of talking about it sort of within the Planning Commission rules of procedure.
Plus, I mean, there's nothing that precludes us from, what is
You
it?
could always comment on it.
That the lawyers say sua sponte on our own, kind of, identify an issue and refer that back to council.
Right.
I mean, it's good. I mean, I agree with what you're proposing, but assuming that doesn't happen, there's nothing that I can tell that, in fact, most of the time, the council members that I talk to are happy to have, if we have an idea on something, I mean, they may not agree with it, but they're very happy to get our input on it. But I agree with you. It's good if that were formalized as something standard as opposed to having to ask for it.
I just feel like the proffers, the special exceptions, I mean, they're all usually related to money. And then there are certain things that are related to money that don't come to us. And it's like, that's interesting. I mean, if we're asked to weigh in on all sorts of things that obviously have a financial implication, you would think that that all of the financial aspects of these deals would come to us for us to weigh in on. And it's, so as long as I've been here, sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't. And it is odd that we have to like advocate and ask when it should just naturally flow down to us. And, the council can still do what they want, but it's odd that they selectively choose when to ask our advice on things very much related to the development deals that we see.
Plus, a lot of times, the council referral is not something that they sit down and craft themselves. It's kind of shared with them.
And I think that's the case. I don't even think that the council is making the decisions. It's staff. So if we have it in there, then staff should be able to read what we've asked and then just follow through with it. Because I do think that often the choices about what we see related to finance actually is not the council making the decision. It's our city manager. So, anyway, I just think we should signal to that person that we do want to see the finances related to things that are related to development. So that's it.
Okay, electronic participation?
So just to close this up, we'll make the adjustments we were talking about here tonight and bring it back in a future packet for your all's action on the rules of procedure.
Sounds good.
Electronic participation, I'm going to turn this one over almost immediately to Mr. Jack Trainer, just to say that the state code has been updated, I think, to allow more flexibility, but I'll let Mr. Trainer speak to that in electronic participation. So I'll let him provide you with a sort of a summary of the components, and then the detailed program is laid out, and the detailed program does come from state code. So it's more of a here is the option we have available. It's not really something that we can negotiate or change.
Right. Thanks, Mr. Stoddard. And that's correct. I believe the policy as literally written, included in this as an attachment, I think was written up by the city attorney, but based on the state code amendments that have been made most recently. So the summary of the policy is that generally, yes, that remote participation is possible for commissioners. let's see, on the day of or before the meeting, commissioners requesting remote participation have to let the chair know ahead of time and the staff liaison. More as a courtesy, it's not a deal breaker if the staff liaison's not included, but as a clerical matter, that would be nice. When requesting remote participation, there must be a quorum physically present in the meeting room as a prerequisite. And the requesting commissioner has a couple different buckets to choose from when citing reasons for their request. The first is temporary or permanent disability. Second is family medical condition. The third is a commissioner's physical residence is more than 60 miles from the meeting location. And the fourth is personal matter, which will probably be used the most. There is a limit to the number of times that an applicant can request remote participation based on personal matter, which is capped at 25% of the annual meeting of the meetings held in a year.
So for us, we have 2 meetings a month, that's 24, so it's about 4 or 5 meetings a year in theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in that request, the commissioner has to state, with some specificity, the nature of the personal matter. And then at the meeting itself, the commissioners must vote to approve or disapprove the member's participation remote. So that's the kind of general policy. The policy in its entirety is included as an attachment, which we can go to if there's any questions about any of that.
I think council, when they do this, they seem to have like a set script that they read from, and they kind of know how to do this pretty quickly. Is that something that we'll have as well?
I can
So
look
we don't
into
have
that.
to go back to the rules of
Sure.
procedure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see what council uses and prepare something of
That would be
similar
very
way.
helpful.
Sure.
Crib sheets.
So just so I understand, if there's illness, either you're ill or a family member is ill, unlimited numbers of remote participation meetings. There's no limit on that reason for participating remotely.
Right, for non-personal matters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you that probably like travel or other personal matters. So I do have a question because I was with the CACT last week when they reviewed their rules, and I think that they are planning to do fully virtual meetings a few times a year. Is that, I'm not lobbying for that for us personally, but.
ESC also mentioned that for all virtual.
Yeah, so are there different rules for different boards and commissions than us?
There are certain sort of decision-making bodies or non-statutory bodies that have greater flex. Right,
Got
all
it.
of what's underpinning all of this is that these are all public groups and public business is supposed to be conducted in the open. And so certainly for groups that are making decisions, the City Council, the Planning Commission, the BZA, there's an expectation that there will be sort of in-person transparency. For other groups that are more of an advisory nature, there is greater flexibility for them to meet all remote.
Okay, understood. And that's specified in the state code, I presume?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I just had a question about the personal matter. I don't know why we're asking the person to detail what that is and then voting on it. I mean, I trust all my commissioners. I trust anybody who's going to spend all this voluntary time with us. And if they have a personal matter, you all want to be here. This is why you're here. I wouldn't question it at all. I wouldn't even feel we need to vote on it. But, that's just, my opinion on it. But I feel if somebody's going to flag that, there's a real reason, and I trust that there's a reason that they can't make it in person. And I think that we all realize the value of the in-person meeting when we have the public here and we get to hear them speak and we get to see them. We make eye contact with them, also with all of you guys. I mean, a virtual meeting versus an in-person meeting means something different. I can look down and see how everyone's reacting to things that we're saying. But I just feel odd, like being like, well, why aren't you here? And I want to know, and I'm going to vote yes or no whether I approve that. That seems overkill. So
think it's
I would say we should amend that if we can.
Our state legislators looking over us once again. When I hear council do this, it's very brief. I mean, there are no details.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, this can't be amended because it's a state statute. But yeah, as I've seen council do it, there's no regulation or guidance about how specific you have to be. Right. It's if it's a very private matter, then that can be guarded. Right. I think there's all the the level of trust, as you mentioned, Mr. Hyra.
Okay. Any other comments from Mr. Trainer? I guess we'll get this back then, as you say, Mr. Stoddard, in a few weeks.
Yeah, we'll bring this back at the same time as the rules of procedure so that we can get both documents sort of cleanly updated and refreshed.
Okay. I just had one last item related to this is I know we had an annual report for 2022 that was done. Are we still going to do a verbal presentation to council?
Yes, and I'm looking for a date for you all to do that on the council schedule.
Okay, very good. All right, I think, did we exhaust that item? If so, we can move on to the information items. Mr. Stoddard?
I'll go first. Thank you very much, Chair and members of the Commission. So you all did have a lighter agenda this evening, so I did take advantage of that and sort of fill the director's report with some items that I've seen coming across the wires recently. So I did want to keep you all aware of things on a variety of fronts. First up is I'm very excited about the way that the page turned out. Who doesn't get excited about org charts and budget proposals? The 2024, the fiscal year 2024 CPED's infographic, the graphic is courtesy of one of our staff planners, Cameron Garris, pulled this together. A lot of this was trying to sort of demystify or break down what happens within community planning and economic development services. Right, it is the larger department that planning is a part of, along with economic development, zoning, building safety, as well as the permit counter services. And overarching and guiding all five of those work groups is the same mission statement, and that is to improve quality of life and support the development of a safe city that balances economic, environmental, and social needs of current and future generations. And just walking through the document, you can see we're under the leadership of Jim Snyder, the department director, and then there are various positions that fall, leadership positions underneath of that, the building official, the zoning administrator, the planning director, and then the economic development chief, and then they all have work groups underneath of them. I am going to focus the rest of this on the planning division specifically. It is within your rules of procedure to get updates on our budget, and so I want to make sure I'm fulfilling that role. Within the planning division, we're organized into 3 work groups. It is very common for us, those 3 work groups, to share resources, and it's common for people to work on multiple projects. So it's not by any means a siloed organization, and we even work within other divisions at times. But this is how we are loosely organized. Current planning, that's where development application reviews get routed, and that continues to be a priority area or a focus area of work. So when there are times when we're short-staffed, either because of the application load or budget decisions or staffing vacancies, that is the work area that we always cover first. People are paying application fees, and so we do see it as a fee-for-service model there. And so that is the review of the special exceptions, the major projects that come through, as well as the routine applications, site plans, subdivisions. And then, of course, that's also where VC tracking and compliance runs as well. Next to that, we have future planning, and this is often the area that we borrow from most. I don't know that people were tracking the years in the rules of procedure for updates to the comprehensive plan, but we did flag as we were preparing the budget this year that it is a document that it is falling out of date. Even the vision chapter, which people are probably thinking of as a recent exercise, was 5 years ago. State code is to review and revise the plan as needed every 5 years. Mobility for all modes that I think people still turn to for quite a bit of guidance was updated in 2014. So when you think about these providing a 20-year outlook with a 5-year plan, a lot of these are falling behind. And there were reasons for that, but we want to reorient the ship a little bit, and so we're going to focus on those items with the resources we do have. So we'll be focusing on reviews of the comprehensive plan, and of course that's a community conversation, as well as any necessary revisions to small area plans, as well as zoning code modernizations, and that's a future item I have in my report this evening. And then to the extent that there are other items flagged in the council work plan, whether that's an update to building design standards or parking standards or the bicycle master plan, we're going to look for creative ways to get those done, whether that's looking for technical assistance grants or using year-end funds to bring on outside consultants, folks with subject matter expertise to deliver those specific items. The chart shows sort of 3 blue meeples and 2 empty meeples. The 2 empty meeples are a projection of what would be needed to deliver all of the council work plan items on the proposed schedule with in-house resources. And so that's why we've come up with this strategy of we're going to stick to core services, comprehensive plan, small area plan, data and research, zoning monitor. We're going to do that in-house. And then to the extent that there are other items on the council work plan that we also need to deliver, that's where we will be looking for additional resources in terms of one-time funding to get those done. And then transportation, always an important topic within the DC region and Falls Church specifically. Looking at a structure where a full team of 3 people would be able to deliver on the expectations that the community has for us in terms of grant applications, coordination with regional entities, and then delivering neighborhood traffic calming and permit parking. For the short term, we do actually have an overhire position authorized, so we will be operating at a full 3-person team. That 3rd person will come on in late June, so there is a bit of a gap there, but we are hiring someone who's finishing up a final semester, so looking forward to her joining the team in June when we'll be sort of fully staffed against the council work plan, and we'll be able to deliver on those items. So that is sort of the read on what we're looking at going into fiscal year 24. Are there any questions about I guess, how we're structured or any feedback on sort of the priorities of the group or things maybe we should be thinking of that we're not?
Any comments? Mr. Hyra?
I just had a question about the broader like economic development and planning being underneath it. Has it always been like that here? I've just seen other places that have an economic development arm and the planning arm, and they're separate. I'm curious of the history, if you know it, but you've been here a while, so.
Sure. Yeah, so there used to be a Department of Development Services, and that was sort of a 3-prong entity with planning, zoning, and building safety. And economic development was a separate office that answered directly to the city manager. And going back several years, it had 3 employees, then it had 2 employees, then it had 1 employee. And having an office with 1 employee was a tough spot. And we said, well, gosh, we already work together a lot. Can we maybe strengthen your your ability to perform by bringing you within the department? And so that's when DDS became CPEDS, and we merged economic development in and became a 4-prong entity.
When did that happen?
That would have been while we were in temporary city hall, so it would have been
About 4 years
4-ish
ago?
years ago.
Okay, all right, thanks.
About 4 years ago,
Yeah.
maybe? Yeah. And, I mean, in a sense, I don't want to say separation, but there's, you've got Jim Snyder who does the EDO kind of things, and you obviously do the planning things, so.
Right. Yeah, there is a pretty clear separation of responsibilities in terms of what EDO, the Economic Development Office, is responsible for delivering versus planning. Like I said, we do talk quite a bit. We share office spaces, but a lot of that is about sort of partnership and making sure we know what the other is doing.
Thank you.
So when your new hire starts in June, they will fill in the transportation planning area, and then you think you will be able to make a little more progress on Ped Bike at that point? Is
Yeah,
that the
I would
goal?
expect we'll be able to, once we have 3 people, I think what you'll probably see is a faster turnaround on NTC projects, more permanent. Right now, we're borrowing staffing from future planning to staff the CACT. So some of this is just sort of getting future planning back. Future planning continues to be the pool that lends out its resources. We did. We did sign permit reviews out of future planning. We've done some of the development applications out of future planning, and now we're doing CACT out of future planning. So eventually we'll be able to get those resources back. And then, yes, we'll be able to do faster responses on NTC, better engagement with the CACT. We'll also be able to return to doing some of the things we used to do, things like marketing for bike share, being more involved in Bike to Work Day, being involved in Parking Day, those kinds of special events and one-time events that are so important for promotion and letting people know about the options they do have throughout the city.
Yeah, we will, I'm sure, appreciate that, and maybe you can help at some point support the Bike Everywhere weekend that Bike Falls Church is organizing for this year. I'm curious about in the future planning area, do you think that getting technical assistance in that area will be an effective approach, or is it better to keep some of those things in-house because staff is more familiar with kind of the lay of the land of the city? That is, I'm understanding that correctly, right? That's the plan.
Yeah, that's why I'm sort of so insistent on keeping comp planning and small area planning inside the city, that those are things that are an ongoing community conversation, and it's just hard to have somebody else come in and write your comp plan. Typically, they're writing sort of the comp plan they wrote for the last community, and it's not a good fit, and they spend a lot of time, the consultants will spend a lot of time just coming up to speed. And so when we have gotten good, we have had good partnerships with consultant firms. The city's design guidelines that were done now several years ago, but that's a good document. It requires technical expertise. We can have good conversations about sort of what's important to the community and what's not, and we can get some good guidance on those things. So I think it is. I think if the work is structured properly, it can be very productive, and it does give us an opportunity to grab expertise that maybe we wouldn't have otherwise in-house.
Okay, so they wouldn't be working on sort of the core comprehensive plan or small area plan, but other sort of related?
Right. So those first
Sub-plans?
3 things we would suggest keeping in-house. Things like ongoing data and research, keeping track of how many housing units are there in the city, regularly publishing the annual community profile about what's going on and what's coming up. Those are the things that we would expect to do in-house, as well as zoning modernization. But other items, like I said, we've got the bike plan update. We did the first one in-house. I think it's a good plan, but I wrote it, and I know that there are ways to make it better, and I think that's a reason to bring in someone from the outside and say, we got a very good critique from Virginia Tech about, here are some things that you're missing in your plan, and I think having someone who does this as part of their day job come in and say, well, gosh, here's a better way to structure a plan, or here's what other communities are doing if you want to be on the leading edge of this.
Okay, so
And
it's
so I
more
think
like
there
the
is a value.
tactical.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yep.
You mentioned the design guidelines. I think they're from 2002.
Yep.
Yeah, so that
There's
would
a
be.
lot of emphasis on canopies for gas stations and how to lay out landscaping for surface parking lots. I think
Yeah.
I would be interested in seeing those updated to provide design guidance on mid-rise multifamily, how people are structuring their rooftop spaces, what percentage of open space and tree canopy should we be going for? Are people self-shading the buildings to provide
Yes.
climate resilience? There are a
All the
lot of
above.
things that communities are doing that we should be talking about as well.
And we have an architect amongst our members now, so.
We would be eager, I think, to see those design guidelines updated. And then you mentioned the Mobility for All Modes, which was updated in 2014, and the Vision chapter, which was 2017. But I think we have two other chapters that date back to 2005. So is there a
Yeah.
reason that those haven't been updated, or are they on? I mean, it doesn't seem to me like maybe they're on the list next in line to be updated, but they are the oldest.
Public facilities is down there. We had made a go at that internally, and then, as I said, sort of current planning taking the lead, we reassigned the staff to handle development applications. So I think that is one of the things we're trying to do is have enough people in current planning so that we can also have a stable future planning team. Because I think it's fine to let a comprehensive plan fall 1 year behind. It's probably okay to let it fall 2 or 3 years behind, but once it starts to fall 4 or 5+ years behind, that makes it difficult because it does leave open this conversation about what is the next important topic to tackle, and you've lost you lose the opportunity to have the pulse of the community. Right? It's not so much that we're going to do what the words on the page say, but it's that we're going to have a conversation about what's the most important thing to do next.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it feels to me like public facilities would be, so I'm glad you all are working on it. It sounds like it's maybe in progress. And I think the other one was community character.
Yes.
Which also strikes me as something that is kind of foundational to some of the other portions of the plan, and maybe design guidelines, right, that we would be updating. So, yeah.
Staff capacity, right?
It's always sort of, how you use the resources we got.
You all do a great job, Paul, with what
Thank
you got.
I think we just do a great job.
Always room for improvement.
Well, I think that we move on the ground faster than our plans, right? Like if you look at what's
Yeah.
being built and
Right.
all the cranes, and it's not like we're not doing development. We just don't always update the plans. We just go without the plan.
I think the small area plan, just to give credit for the small area planning initiative, maybe I should save this one till later, but I will say that the small area plans have generally tried to sort of provide guidance, when we're seeing interest in different corridors, right? It started with North Washington because there were applications in for North Washington. We took them out of order and did South Washington next because those applications were in. And so we have moved the small area planning to try and be either just behind or a little bit ahead of where the development interest is. And so I do think that those have served as a model to guide development applications, but also make sure that public investments in the form of CIP are following, either showing the way or following behind to fill in any gaps.
I do have a comment on our small area plans. They strike me as almost like, and I, maybe I'm just not understanding sort of the way that these are created, but they kind of strike me as sort of like mini comprehensive plans for individual parts of the city. And I sometimes find that they have a lot of the similar recommendations. And I personally would prefer if they could kind of focus on okay, what is different about this area? And we know we want to do all these things. These are in our environmental chapter, our transportation chapter. And so we know we want to do all of these X, Y, and Z things, but what about this area is unique and different? Because I find them sometimes a little bit long and unwieldy. So that's my personal experience with them. I do think that they're helpful, guides for us as commissioners, but I guess I just wonder, what's your view on it? How differentiated do you think each of them are? Do you think that they contain kind of some similar advice?
They do overlap. So I wrestle with this often when we're writing, one document or the other. So for comprehensive plans, those chapters are organized by topic. So it's the overall system for transportation, the overall vision for transportation within the city, or the overall need for public facilities, or the overall network of green spaces. And so it's taking a citywide view and often sort of looking at what are the jurisdictional sort of partners on the other side of the lines doing, so that as a system, the whole city sort of holds together. And then within the small area plans, what that's saying is, okay, there's specific guidance of we need to get ready for climate change because it's happening. And so it'll look at, well, what are the issues that are facing this particular area? Is it flooding because there's a stream in it? Is it a lack of tree canopy because it's 78% impervious? The East End comes to mind. Or is it, over on the West End, the real issue is a lack of streets, that you've got essentially two streets. You've got Broad Street, and then you've got Haycock Shreve, and that's it. There are no other. I guess you got Birch and Gordon Road, but largely there are no streets breaking up those parcels. And so if you're thinking about how is transportation going to flow, where are you going to put outdoor dining? One of the underlying issues is you don't have a street grid that can support that. And so it is sort of figuring out what are the particular challenges that an area faces, but also what is the vision, what are the things to build on that area and strengthen.
Yeah, I think delay kind of feeds into that too. I mean, the one I'm a little bit more familiar with is the environmental area, where, let's say in the last 3 years or so, the whole concept of electrification has kind of gained a lot of currency. Well, if you go back to our small area plans from 15 years ago, it's, nothing's going to be in there. So there's a tendency to say, well, we got to put it in whatever the latest small area plan is, even though really it is something that is overarching. It should apply to every.
Right. Right.
So that's a challenge. Okay.
Next item.
Are we on to the next item? Yeah.
So just keeping you aware, this is something we're trying to do as part of our regular practice. Obviously, you all have a role in recommending the CIP, and we want to keep you aware as that goes through implementation. So Carrie O'Nino recently drafted 2 technical assistance applications. These are through COG's Transportation Land Use Connections Program, as well as the Regional Roadway Safety Program. They're running the 2 programs jointly, so you only have to fill out the application once to apply to both. So we put in 2 applications. The first was for a look at a redesign of Wilson Boulevard that we would obviously partner with Fairfax County as well as Arlington County on. It's something we had explored early, and we had found, thinking it through with our partners, that we really needed to think about this getting all the way from the Seven Corners interchange to the Patrick Henry intersection where the Arlington County bike facilities pick up. Because there is the proposed BRT, you've got the bike connection. Is there a potential for, obviously the big push from the city side is to get a road diet along Wilson Boulevard, maybe one day called Saigon Boulevard, and then also add pedestrian connections along the way. By crash data, it does show up on the map as a place where crashes unfortunately do happen, and so trying to find a way to tame that street so that it is pedestrian focused versus auto focused is an interest for city staff. And then the other is to provide some technical assistance on making that important east-west connection between the WNOD Trail and the West End site, and obviously the school's campuses as well. That obviously there are a lot of ideas out there. It's a connection that the Virginia Tech study again emphasized as being important, and so having someone look in and what are the practical ways to connect those 2 spots with a dedicated bike and ped facility.
Would that one look at easements and land purchase possibilities? And
yes, I think that's what it would lay out, is sort of here's what you could do with the land you own, here's what you could do if you were going to buy something or partner with somebody.
I'm really excited about both of these. I hope they are successful.
Will the 80,000 cover the cost of the project?
It'll cover the technical assistance. Then the eventual project. Typically what we do is we either partner if there's an application in, there aren't any applications in, sort of for either of these areas. So we would either look for a private partner or we would program funds in the CIP.
Good luck.
Thank you. Next up is another award it's an award application. Technically, we nominated ourselves as the wording here, but this is recognizing the success the city's had with the small area plans. Again, recognizing that we do these things in-house, which is a little bit different from the way other jurisdictions do it. But we have been able to turn these plans around usually in 9 to 15 months. Some take a little less, some take a little more. But they have provided guidance that has knitted together what's going on the private side in terms of developer interest, what are the public facilities needed to promote that. And if you look at the CIP that the city's delivering now, a lot of those projects got their start in the small area planning process. And so this has been a helpful way to identify what is the community need and how can we sort of bring those resources together to sort of improve an existing area. Next up, let's see, these are updates on capital improvement programs, and I did trim down these, so full disclosure, these plan sheets have 70 sheets in them, but I didn't bring you the curb profiles and the stormwater calculations, but I did bring the layout, the title sheet, obviously, and then layout sheets, striping plans, landscaping plans as well, for 3 CIP projects that have hit either 90 or 100% design. And maybe I should highlight a couple things. So first is Berman Park. And if we can go, so this was an outgrowth of the Parks for People plan, recognizing that Berman Park could be a great green connection, or it is a great green connection, and we can better advertise it with safer crossings. So this is the proposal to improve the crossing where Ellison and Kent come together. What's shown on the plan sheets, these are always a little difficult to read, but the existing park pavilion is that rectangle in the top center of the screen. The Fields Apartments would be along the right side of the screen, as well as south, sort of on the other side of Ellison Street. And so what's proposed is to bring out the curb lines and then provide special markings at all of the crosswalks. Today, most of these crossings are unmarked. Although they legally exist, they don't exist in a way that anyone can see. And so the idea is emphasizing that really this is a park space. People should slow down and treat it appropriately. If we go to the next page. So we come to the next intersection. Again, the idea of drawing out the curb lines, shorten the crossing distance, increase the visibility of the park and obviously the park users, and make sure that people can better navigate the park. We did, with all these designs, we did widen the crossing out to 10 feet. The park trail itself is only 5 feet wide, but one day there might be a call to expand it, and so we wanted to be ahead of that and make sure that the crossings and the curb ramps are all designed to a 10-foot width. If we scroll down again, I think we get to the last crossing. This is where Spring and Leah Court come together. Today, if you go out there, this is the Scout House, which does own some of the land near here, and so that did limit some of the design. But the Scout House is sort of adjacent and off-screen to the right and up. And so the idea, again, is to emphasize this as the beginning of the park and provide a proper entrance to it. All right, we can jump to the next one, which is West Broad Multimodal.
Oh, when does the Berman project actually start?
I can get the schedule for that. Now that they're going into 100% design, we'll be proceeding into the next steps, which are getting final VDOT reviews, getting permission to advertise for construction, going through competitive procurement, and then beginning the construction itself. I think this is scheduled for, well, I'll double check before I get you a month. I don't want to misspeak there. I have hopes, and then there's reality. So this is the West Broad Multimodal. Again, this was an outgrowth of the West Broad Small Area Plan that recognized Broad Street is a great street in the city, but it's very hard to walk across it on foot. And so this was an effort to really improve the pedestrian crossings as well as the pedestrian experience in the corridor. If we scroll down. So this is the intersection at West. So the grant project will pick up the missing pieces. Founders Row 1 is obviously picking up has already picked up the upper right corner. Founders Row 2 and their approved site plan is picking up the lower left corner. And so what's left for the grant application is to update the curb ramps that those projects aren't touching. But those projects in combination are delivering all of the crosswalks. If we go to the next page. So here are some cleanups to make ADA compliant the entrances along the south side of the street, as well as do some expansions of the sidewalk space. That was a comment that you all made when you reviewed these plans earlier, that 6 is better than 5 and 7 is better than 6. And so where we could within existing right-of-way, we look to expand that as much as we could. We also made some strategic decisions with materials. So where there was existing brick sidewalk, or whether it would complete a missing piece of the brick sidewalks, we did go with brick. But where there were long stretches of existing concrete or there were no connections to concrete, we did stick with concrete. And those were more for sort of cost reasons. If we scroll down. So this is at Spring Street, and the redo of the Spring Street intersection is programmed as a separate project within the CIP. But we did, as part of this project, we will be able to bring the curb ramps into ADA compliance and tighten up the intersection crossings. And then the later CIP project would deliver the proper mast arms and other design elements. If we go down, so this is Oak. And of course, as part of this, the Broad Street Hawk signals are also going in nearby. But here, this is giving proper treatment to the, and this is along the north side of the street. The Hilton Garden Inn is to the right, and then the Flower Building is to the left. And so there is a short gap of streetscape, and we'll be able to fill that in. That's what's shown to the east of Oak Street there, is filling in that sidewalk gap. And then on the south side of the intersection, we're able to tighten up the intersection and give the ramp a proper direction. We really don't have a proper ramp on that intersection of South Oak and Broad, and so by bringing out those curb lines, we can maintain the minimum travel lane widths and bring those things into ADA compliance. If we go down... so this should be Lee, where we've got the Kensington in the upper left and then the Broadway in the upper right. And this is squaring up that existing intersection and also providing the missing ped heads. So for anyone who walks this intersection, you've probably noticed that there are ped heads missing, and this project will deliver the missing ped heads, deliver the missing sidewalk links, and also it'll deliver the missing gap of sidewalk that will complete the block on the south side. On the south side, you've got the Byron, and then you've got the nice entrance to Howard E. Herman that the city recently installed. And so this last bit of streetscape will get that enhancement all the way through to the South Lee Street intersection. And then if we go, I think there's just two more. So new crossing going in. This would be connecting the Solace Brewery space on the top side of the picture with the recently done renovations at the Inns of Virginia site to the south. But this would be installing a new signalized crossing of the street there. This is often a spot where pedestrians are seen crossing the street. It's also one of the longest gaps that the city has between signalized crossings. So this would deliver a new signalized crossing.
Is that a full signal or a hawk?
It would be a hawk.
A hawk.
There are commercial driveways, but we typically wouldn't design a signal for a commercial driveway. And then here we go. So this is Virginia. So this is a cleanup to the Virginia intersection to sort of bring those into ADA compliance, make sure the ramps are pointing in the right direction, and fix up the push buttons to make sure that they have the proper spacing as well. And then this is just another look at the same intersections, but with different information. So this is striping and signage, and then other sheets. I think there are landscaping sheets in here as well. All right, but if there are no questions, I can go to the next one. Let's see. This is the Maple and Annandale Roundabout. So title sheet, so folks may remember that early on the expectation is sort of a partnership with One City Center. That application is currently on hold. And so what we did have to go back, to the plans and make sure we're providing a complete pedestrian network and ADA access. So if we go to the next sheet, this is not the easiest sheet to read. Did I do a better one? Maybe the landscaping sheet? Ooh, this is busy. Okay, let's use this one. So this is, what this is showing is the new crosswalks, the new materials in the sidewalks, and then the ovals along the sort of upper right corner and lower left corner, the new tree planting pits. The grade on the, so you can see a number of trees installed along the upper right corner, and that was part of the project from the beginning. Along the lower left corner, we were able to work in one tree as we redesigned the project with a plan to move forward. While the One City Center application is on hold, I think we would get a more complete corner there on the lower left as well as the lower right if One City Center moves through the approval process. And then the upper left corner was one of the more frustrating corners to design, that there is, it turns out, a fairly significant amount of grade falling off from the sidewalk and then into the adjacent parking lot. And so we did look at it a number of different ways to try and fit a wider sidewalk, more street trees. And what we found was that in order to have the soil volume needed to support a tree, we had really a substantial amount of grade back into the parking lot to the point we didn't think it was going to be feasible.
So I guess the plan is bicycles would just ride the street here. All right.
Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, that was the guidance that we got from the design consultant, saying they've looked at roundabouts in a number of areas, and they recommended merging the bike traffic into the travel lane. And I have seen it sort of handled two different ways when it comes to roundabouts. One is to merge the bike traffic and the car traffic into a single lane, which sort of maximizes everyone's visibility. The other way I've seen it is to provide sort of a bypass sort of on the sidewalk. So if a cyclist wasn't comfortable navigating the roundabout, they could sort of exit onto the sidewalk and work their way around. With the sort of the tightness of the road right away, I don't know that there was really room to add sort of a side-by-side bike facility sort of up on top of the curb.
Do we have 2 lanes through there on Annandale?
1 lane. So today it works as 2 lanes from most approaches, and this would bring it down to 1 lane.
And what is the width of that lane? Sorry, I'm trying to understand what is.
I don't know if we have that width snapped, but it would typically be somewhere between 11 and maybe on the high end 13 feet to accommodate
Well,
the
this is showing
turns.
18 feet.
We did have to accommodate, this is also part of the truck route for the Harris Teeter, and so we had to think about how would sort of trucks come through this intersection.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the bikes having to merge into the traffic. I think we all know that Sharrows are not really much protection at all. So I think it's kind of a shame that, we have an opportunity to rebuild this intersection with a roundabout, and we are making a lot of great improvements, it looks like, for pedestrians, but it doesn't seem like bikes are really well considered here, in my opinion. But I don't know. What do my colleagues think?
Well, I think some bicyclists will say fine, the ones that are kind of more athletic oriented will handle it, but people who are a little bit more safety
Yeah.
desirous will probably just go on the sidewalk.
Yeah, it just feels like a missed opportunity to me, but maybe. And it also seems like a critical section of our bike network. So, yeah. This is 90%, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, so it's fully baked at this point. So I guess we'll see how it goes. It seems like we do have some room. Maybe there could be changes in the future that would provide a little more protection for cyclists. Shouldn't have to relegate people to bridges to protect them from car traffic. I object to that mentality.
Does this need to wait for forward progress on the One City Center, or would this go ahead independent?
So this plan is complete enough from sort of ADA compliance and design. It's complete enough to proceed on its own. I think it would be beneficial to this project if the One City Center application did start moving forward again, because it would certainly deliver a more complete solution. It really is that lower right corner in particular. We had to push that sort of rightmost crossing out further from the intersection, just because of conflicts with the existing driveways and parking garage. It also pushed the lowest most crosswalk as well, and so I think a redesign of the site would allow for some shorter walking paths, as well as sort of a more complete streetscape treatment. Let's see, the next, so that clears it for project reviews, and then next up was zoning cleanups. And so this is something I mentioned where the zoning ordinance has fallen maybe a little out of date with best practices, or in some cases even state code. And so, wow, that's going to be hard to read on the screen. It's much easier when I print it out. I apologize for that. Let me summarize the changes, and then I can take questions on each of them. First is, and this will obviously be a community conversation, but removing the requirements for especially front yard averaging. So this is something that the commission has taken up before in subdivision applications, but is also something that's regularly seen at the zoning counter when people come in for relatively modest changes to their site, whether it's installing a porch or in some cases constructing a new home. For folks who aren't familiar, the front yard averaging rule applies in the single-family zoning districts, and what it says is that your front yard requirement is the greater of either the number in the code or the average of what your neighbors have. And so the downside of that is you can buy your property and it has one setback at the time you buy it, and then based on what your property owner does, or even what your property owner 2 doors down does, it can actually change what your front yard requirement is. And so the status of your property can change over time, based on nothing you've done with your property. Let's see, the second is something that is commonly approved as a variance, but really shouldn't be a variance because it's so common, and that is that when somebody has an existing non-conforming building, meaning the footprint encroaches in some yard requirement, someone will come in to do a second-story addition. And obviously, right, I think there's the mantra of the greenest building you have is the one you already have built. And so allowing these second-story additions, even though they are non-conforming buildings, is an environmental approach, because if people are looking for an economical way to expand their house, allowing them an addition is the easiest path forward, especially when the alternative is sort of clearing the site and starting again. And so looking to move that from a sort of a non-allowed status, which drives them into the variance process, to instead allow for an administrative approval process for those second-story additions. Third is allowing for porch projections into the rear yard. So current code allows for a modest extension into a front yard requirement for an open porch, and the request here is to allow a similar allowance for porches into the backyard. Obviously, that's a place that people see as more private, and they like to have some outdoor space, and it's a common request people make. Fourth is just a code cleanup. So at some point, the code was recodified. In an earlier time, there was such a thing as a street side yard, but now the way corner lots are defined, there is no such thing as a street side yard, so it's just a term that's in the zoning ordinance that has no meaning. Fifth, the variance tests were changed in state code several years ago, but then those changes weren't mirrored in the city code, and so it has led to confusion where people apply for a variance applying the wrong standards. So we just want to make sure that we're matching the state code requirements there. Sixth relates to comprehensive sign packages, where comprehensive sign packages currently are all done through variance. So when a major mixed-use application comes in, they typically have a comprehensive package about where the signs are going to go, the type of colors, the types of lettering, how big they're going to be, how well the lighting's done, where on the building they're going to go. There's nothing in the sign ordinance that permits for those kinds of things, and so they all have to be done by variance. A better practice would be to allow for those things to come through as part of the site plan process, and then you could get a cohesive look at the architecture of the building as well as the sign packages at the same time. And then last is we just have a referencing error. Recently, well, not that recently, there was a recodification to change the section numbers and the waiver provisions for landscaping. They're the same waiver provisions that were always there. They just point to the wrong numbers. So we just want to make sure that those are cleaned up as well. There is a work session tentatively scheduled for late May after the council gets through the budget process to bring these ideas to council, and then obviously they would come to you all for your advice and recommendation as well.
I want to thank you for the signage one. I've been asking for that one for a long time, so thank you.
I cannot take credit for any of this list. Akita Ruzzi, our newly installed zoning administrator, has been flagging these things for years, and now that she's got the opportunity, she's saying, let's get these cleaned up. So Henry Zhang, one of our new principal planners, is going to take the lead on it, and we'll do what we can.
Okay, before we go to the correspondence, I skated past the 8A, the Commissioner Comont's article on Kevin Klinkenberg, so I just wanted to give you a chance if you had anything you wanted to say on
No,
that.
not particularly. I just wanted to share that particular article with you all. I follow Kevin Klinkenberg on Twitter, learned about his new podcast, listened to it. His first episode is he actually reads that piece from 2018 where he talks about what is a messy city, and I felt like it had some relevancy to some of the discussions we've been having with transitional zones, and so just wanted to share it with you all in case you hadn't seen it. It's a few years old, so maybe it already crossed your desk, but maybe of new relevance. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. All right, I guess we're in correspondence, and item 8C.
So I don't have I can introduce the item. This is some correspondence between the city. It's the city manager providing an update to council on the status of the Park Avenue Great Streets project and the upcoming 60% design and the design guidance that's being provided to the project team. And it walks through the engagement process to date and then the sort of industry guidance that's steering the project team and the design decisions.
Yeah, I think there's interest in, on various people providing feedback, but the problem at the moment is, I don't think, I might be wrong on this, but I don't think the 60% plans have been shared. And so I think there's some hesitation to know what to say because we're still looking at the 30% plans, which is the ones I think that were presented to us back in November of, might have been 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I would provide that feedback that, if there's any way that, I guess it would be DPW, or I'm not real sure, but somebody that knows what these 60%, I mean, VDOT knows what they are, right? Because they've been, they've got them. But I think it would be good to figure out a way to share what the 60% plans are and any key differences from the 30% so that some community engagement and feedback. And Ms. Comont and myself were at the CACT meeting, and there was, some very concerned discussion about the Great Streets project, particularly as it relates to accommodating bicycles. So.
Sure, I can track that plan sheet down, and what we can probably do is schedule time for you all to review those plans, and if you do have sort of design comments or process comments, whatever they are, we have in the past sort of drafted up recommendations from the Planning Commission that then were addressed to council on how to address design challenges with city projects.
Yeah, my understanding is that what's recommended is a bicycle boulevard, which, could work, I think, but we would really need to look at lowering the volumes and speeds on Park. I understand that the consultant seems to think that they're well within the bounds for a safe bicycle boulevard, but I'm not sure that I'm as confident as they are in that, and our population is going to be growing. So I think we just need to give a really hard look at what we can do to reduce volumes and speeds on that section of Park. And yeah, as far as the process, it does feel like there's been a fair amount of feedback on this plan and things have just kind of continued to move forward in a way that maybe has not incorporated that feedback. So I would say that's disappointing to me as one of the people who's been offering some feedback on this. So yeah, I just hope there can be a little more engagement. I don't know if how fully baked it is at 60%. I'm hopeful that there are still changes that we can make so that this can really feel like, a sort of ped bike first kind of place. I think that's really what we want on Park Avenue. I don't think we want it to be, a parallel through street like to Broad. So whatever we can do to prevent that kind of behavior of drivers on Park, I think would be useful. So I think we need to have those discussions now. I know this is still a number of years out too, and best practices in design for cyclists are likely to change, even over like the next 4 years. And that's a tough thing when you're trying to plan a major project like this, and it's fully baked 4 years before it's built. I don't know. That just strikes me as a kind of a difficult thing. What do you know about the past experience of Volkert, the consultant that we're using with regard to bicycling? Is that something that they typically work on, or is it sort of outside of their area of expertise?
They do have a strong staff team in terms of bicycle planning on Volkert. One of the folks they have on their team, and I've actually reached out to him for guidance in the past, it's Charlie Denny, who was previously a bike planner with Arlington. He actually provided some early advice to the CACT as well as the EDA about how to get started with a bike sharing system here in Falls Church. And so he does have a good name in the industry, and he is on the Volker team, and he was one of the folks that was out during the walking tour explaining some of the mechanics of how things lay out.
So he is actively working on this project. I asked because the letter that we received from Volkert, or that Mr. Astorga received, is from their lead landscape architect.
Mm-hmm.
So just made me wonder how engaged their bike folks are in the plans.
Yeah, so that was a positive turn, actually, to see the landscape architect be the lead. And I think that was done because there was an understanding that the design of the street was so central to sort of the designation as a civic grade street. So on other projects, we've seen the civil engineer take the lead. And that has merits as well. But I think putting a landscape architect sort of in the lead seat made sure that we were going to get a holistic design for the street. And then obviously he's drawing on sort of the various expertises to make sure it's a complete project.
Okay. One of the things that I'm particularly concerned about with this project, and I know it sounds like a small thing, but is the double yellow line on Park Avenue. I'm not a fan of that being implemented. I understand that it's probably required per VDOT, I guess, because they are. So any flexibility we can have on that. I just think it really gives the wrong signal to, the purpose of the street. We don't have a double yellow today, so I really prefer that we not add one that kind of incentivizes the sort of driver behavior that we would not want to see in that area.
Okay, any other comments on the Park Avenue situation? I was just wondering, did you want to share any comments, Paul, before we adjourn on a future agenda?
Oh, gosh, I do usually walk through the agenda. I apologize.
Especially if you have any kind of explanation on these pop-ups, how it's going to work.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. So there are, so the pop-ups start, there is the series of 4 pop-up meetings on site at the Eden Center. First one is this Saturday, March 18th. They are being held some shorter hours, some longer hours, but always in that afternoon time. What we've heard is the most convenient for people to get to. There will be translation services on site for all of the meetings. So looking forward to that. There is, if you'll notice the sequencing of the meetings, it's March 18th, March 22nd, and then March 29th, and then there's a gap till April 22nd. The reason for that gap is that the first 3 meetings are going to be asking questions about sort of what does Eden Center mean to you, what kind of improvements do you want to see, what do you want to see maintained, what are you worried about, what are you excited about, and then there's time for staff to compile all of that information and go back on April 22nd with sort of a what did we hear messaging. So making sure we're reflecting back to the community what we were hearing. So those are the pop-ups, and then this will be scheduled subsequently for future work sessions with council as well as planning commission. One, to report out on the public engagement, and then obviously to bring a revised draft that incorporates feedback from these pop-ups as well as other conversations that are going on with various stakeholder groups, and then previous public comments that were received.
So it's okay for us to show up if we want to?
Oh, yeah, it's encouraged.
Yeah.
That would be great. The
Emily will be there for all of these hours? That's
I don't know if she's going to be there for all of them. She's certainly going to be there
time.
for a lot of them. And I'm going to try and make an appearance, assuming I don't have to make a budget presentation at the same time. And then obviously I'll try to make those as well. And I know council members are planning to stop by as well.
Can you walk through the Pearson Square?
Yeah, we've got a misprint on that.
Okay.
Pearson Square is not going to council for action on the 27th. There was, we had an advertising miss where we failed to get the required legal notice in the paper on the right date. So your recommendation, the Planning Commission's recommendation on Pearson Square is now rescheduled for April 5th. And so we've consequently also rescheduled Pearson Square, I think, to the next available April council meeting, which might be April 10th.
Okay, yeah, I wondered why we weren't looking at that tonight.
Yep, yeah, apologies on that one. And that is the look ahead.
So our next meeting is April 5th then?
Yes, we were gifted with 5 Wednesdays in March, which is always an exciting thing because it means there's a break between meeting night and package distribution. So enjoy the extra time, and yes, the next regular meeting's on the 5th.
Looking good. Any final comments from anybody?
I have a quick question. I have a quick question. Do you know why the sidewalks on Seton Lane between Oak and, I guess, George Mason were replaced
I will ask.
going up the hill there?
It's on Seton, you said?
Yes. It was closed for a week or so, and I thought they might be widening them. They were quite narrow, but they just tore them out and put them back. So I'm just curious. And I think it might be helpful for us to have, is there any kind of schedule of that kind of work that DPW does that is shareable with the Planning Commission or the public? I mean, I live near there, so I was surprised by it. Sometimes there are other projects that are kind of surprised. Most of them are great, but it would just be nice to know when they're going to happen. I'm sure that the neighbors that live right in that block were notified, or I hope they were. But just wondering if there's some way that the community can kind of keep track of those kinds of improvements.
Sure.
Or exact replacements or whatever it was that happened there.
Yeah, I can ask. I know there is some sidewalk work that was done recently in the South Washington Street area, a new sidewalk connection to the Tinner Hill Historic Site, missing link of sidewalk across the street from Pizzeria Orzo. So there are some good pieces of sidewalk going in. I'm not familiar with the work you mentioned, so I'll follow up on that one specifically, and then also the more general question about how is notice shared about sort of sidewalk work.
Thanks.
Okay, if there aren't any other comments, I think our business for this evening is done and we can adjourn.